Welcome to the Wealth Planning for the Modern Physician podcast, hosted by David Mandell, an attorney, author, and OJM Group partner. We share real-world financial lessons from physicians and insights from experts to impact your bottom line. Check the show notes to get a free copy of our book, Wealth Strategies for Today's Physician. Now, over to David.
Hello, folks. Dave Mandell, host of the podcast. Thanks for joining us. If you're seeing our faces on YouTube, which I know a couple of people do, but most of you are listening on the podcast platforms, thank you for doing so. Got a great guest, someone I've known for a little while, very interesting, and I think he's going to have some insights that will help you think about your practice and where it's going business-wise and options. So let me tell you about Matt Phillips, and then we'll get into it. So Matthew Phillips has over 25 years of legal and corporate finance advisory experience. He has successfully represented large public clients as well as smaller privately owned middle market clients in connections with mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, joint ventures, and capital market transactions. Earlier in his career, Matt was a corporate and financial lawyer at Bell, Boyd & Lloyd, and then at Unilever. He's now, and has been since 2011, managing director at City Capital Advisors. And he's extremely well educated, has his AB from Princeton, his JD from Northwestern School of Law, and his MBA from University of Chicago. So like me, he is a JD MBA. So that's great. Matt, welcome.
Thanks, David. It's a pleasure to be with you and chat with you this morning.
Yeah, I'm really happy to have you on, and we kind of have the similar path. Lawyer early on, moving more into financial advising and helping clients in that capacity. So just give us, I gave first of all, we will link to, he has got a very significant bio, as you imagine, based on what I said, and we'll link to that in the show notes so you can dig in more if you're interested. But give us, a little bit about high level of, what you've done with your career and what you're doing now at City Capital, what your role is today.
Sure. Absolutely. Happy to. So, grew up in New Jersey, moved to Chicago out for law school, and I practiced for, almost 10 years, but I really, during that time, I did a mix of corporate and transactional and some trade litigation work, David, but I really wasn't fulfilled in that role. And I was always more interested in the financial advisory side, and financial strategy. And so, I went back, I got my MBA, I transitioned, I switched in kind of 2000. And since that time, I've really been, for the last 25 years, all doing with several different middle market M&A firms, but all largely serving privately held, closely held, and physician-owned businesses over that time. City Capital, so I've been here for 15 years. It's kind of a unique animal in that, we're a small firm. We have a very uniquely differentiated model and a very highly collaborative and supportive one. A lot of investment banks, candidly, are tough places to work. I always say the work itself is hard enough. I don't want my partners or the environment to make it more difficult.
Right.
And
for those of you who can't see, Matt's not wearing a suit or a tie right now, just to give you a sense of the visual. So unlike some of our New York.
Absolutely. I gave that up a long time ago, David.
Let me ask you two questions. That's something you said that I think a lot of docs will ask or think or be wondering. But when you say small firm, how many partners do you have? And
so
number two questions, you can answer both. They're both quick questions. And the second, when you say middle market, what does that mean?
Yeah. So I have roughly 12 partners.
Okay.
The firm has roughly 25 people total.
Got it.
And as a second question, so middle market, right? A lot of people have very different definitions of
Yeah,
what
that's
that
why I
means.
asked, because I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I got an MBA. I was a lawyer. I can take a guess, but I wouldn't. I'd probably be wrong. So that's why I'm asking.
yeah. For us, middle market is probably anywhere from 20 million in enterprise value, David, up to 400 million is probably where we don't do that much above 400 million. But yeah, and I would say our sweet spot, if you will, where most clients fall are usually in that 50 to 150 enterprise range.
And that would, just to work backwards, so the docs are hearing that, what revenue, would that be for a medical practice, right? So people here are driving or they're working out saying, does that mean my practice, or are we too small, or whatever? So again, rough, you're not going to give me the multiple that applies to everybody, but just
Yeah.
ballpark, what are the size practices that you guys are talking to?
Yeah, and it's really interesting, David, and I hate to give you this answer, but it really depends on the group, the nature of their practice, what if
Yeah.
their specialty, what kind of ancillaries that they provide within the practice. Because I've had groups with 3 physicians that are well in that range. I've all the way up to probably one of the larger groups that I've worked with and I work with regularly is probably close to 60 physicians.
Okay. So that gives, I
Yeah.
mean, 3 if you're really killing it and have a lot of ancillaries, and it's a really like probably, pyramid where they're using extenders and
Right.
and all that kind of stuff. And then 60 more probably traditional practice, and sort of everything in between.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
I just want people to get a sense of where that comes from. And so when they come to you, these healthcare related clients, what are they looking for? I mean, obviously, some are going to come saying, "Hey, we want to find a buyer," or a buyer has come to us. But are there other things that you're helping them with?
Sure. So I think the answer is yes. So most often, groups come to us because they are looking to sell their group or practice. Um, and that may be for a whole host of reasons, but oftentimes, as you know, David, it's there's the tension, right? You have senior retiring physicians that have been in the practice for a long time. Their ownership, is now very valuable, and oftentimes the only way to sort of provide them that liquidity is through a transaction of some kind.
Right.
So that's very common, but we also help them with growth capital raising, right, where the money is needed in the practice, whether that's for equipment, technology, expansion, but it's staying within the group and not going out to any of the specific shareholders. And then the third piece that we do, David, is really around practice acquisitions or complementary acquisitions that groups want to do. So we will help our clients find those groups, negotiate those transactions, and help finance them.
So practice wants to grow. They have no desire to sell. They could come to you to help with that. Or, hey, listen, I think it really makes sense for my practice to join up with, Dr. Smith's. We've been talking about it. We're not really sure how to do it, but we think there's a good opportunity because we could own this area and maybe do some things rather than compete. The pie would be bigger if we come together. You can help us figure out how to do that and get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. And a big part of what I've learned over the years, David, is that there's a lot of consulting, strategic consulting, and I kind of feel like education. Because a lot of what we're talking about is is foreign to a lot of physicians. And so helping them understand kind of the process and what's involved and what it means. I feel like I spend a lot of time. So it's not just working on the given transaction. It's a lot of interaction with the providers themselves.
Got it. What would you say? How would you describe today? We're doing this in February 2026. What's the marketplace like in terms of the environment for practices either looking to grow and get capital that way, or merge, like we just talked about, or sell? How would you describe it and compare it to like the last 5 years?
Yeah, it's I would call it, David, it's an unusual and bifurcated market of sorts. It's by no means a capital starved market. So there is a lot of capital out there, as you know, especially focused on healthcare and healthcare services. I would really say it's a selective, highly selective, risk-averse, and underwriting-heavy market. The buyers, investors are still very active, but they need businesses to check a very specific set of boxes today. And that's very different. All those boxes weren't on that checklist a couple of years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. What I see is that financial investors, buyers are prioritizing certainty, compliance, and operational control, really over a hockey stick phenomenal growth story, right? The well prepared groups command strong interest, and the messier ones, they face more challenges. Hard to keep the financial investor interest. So that's really what we're
Interesting.
saying.
It's an interesting, because on this podcast, we had another small investment bank, smaller than yours, but it's been like 5 years, and I think at that point it was sort of like gangbusters, right? Like there were, especially in certain practice areas, derm or ophthalmology, it was like, I think, and we'll talk about this in a second. Maybe some of those deals haven't gone so well, and so the investors are saying, hey, like you're saying, we don't need as much upside, but we certainly want to protect our downside more. So you got to have more stable, sort of well-run practices, which probably gets into what you've been doing, which is helping practices get there. So, a lot of practices have been bought by private equity early on. Season 3, I think it was season 3. Those of you listening, watching, go back. But we had a practice, an orthopedic surgeon and their CEO on 2 years post-transaction, and they were talking about, this is through COVID, that their capital partner was really on the same page with them, and they went through some real hard bumps with COVID and came out the other side and were happy. And I've had a bunch of people on, docs, who've sold their practice, and it's sort of kind of too early to tell, but they were talking about the LOI process and when they went down this road and then changed and et cetera. So you guys obviously have done deals, but you're not the capital investor. So where have you seen that range? I'm sure there's some success, there's some sort of, and there's somewhere like that really hasn't worked out for anybody, and the docs aren't happy. So give me a sense of, maybe what that ratio is, or, some takeaway, if you can't get into that.
Right. Absolutely. And it's a great question, David. So look, and the other thing, maybe just let me clarify for your listeners that I don't do work for the healthcare private equity financial investors are not clients. We don't do work for them. We know them very well, and I have very strong relationships with them because they are always interested in potentially buying or investing in our clients. So it's really important for that I maintain those relationships and know what they do. But we're not working for them by any stretch.
Okay, so you're on one side. That would be called your sell side. Is that how you would describe
really
that?
Totally on the physician side, on the provider side.
Okay.
Um,
Important to make that clarification.
And so, what I would say, because I'm a little bit of a nerd and a geek, and I follow a lot of this, what we're talking about very closely.
Yeah, that's your world.
Yeah, the reputation is really, the private equity reputation in healthcare is worse than the reality. But I will say it's not completely undeserved. That's how what I would say is, the bad actors are out there, right? They absolutely are. And
when you say bad actors, this is sort of what I would consider the stereotype, which is get the deal done, and then it's all about the bottom line and infringing upon the doctor's ability to perform, practice medicine the way they want,
cutting their resources, taking away their resources,
and the patients suffer, and the whole thing, right? That's sort of
pushing them to sell, more services, products, whatever they can,
right?
And taking away their independence to practice medicine. Right. So look, and healthcare is really emotionally charged. It's personal to all of us. Right. So, it's easy to kind of hear these stories and get consumed by them.
Yeah.
And look, private equity is a really easy bad guy villain target. Sure. Right. So, but I would say that I think what a lot of people don't understand is that there are a lot of really good financial investors in healthcare that genuinely have the right values and objectives that align with those of the physicians, where they want to improve the quality of the service. They want to improve operational rigor and discipline, compliance, and they know the importance of it's not just all about the bottom line, right? It's about building a sustainable model, right? That works, that reduces risk, but provides more kind of a long-term investment model, right? A long-term business model.
I that makes sense to me. We did have one private equity investor on in one of the seasons, and again, go back and listen to that one. They were sort of saying the same things. And I think one of the key, and you'll probably say this too, but one of the key success factors is if you are going to go sell, or it's approached, is to do your due diligence and understand if this is the right capital partner that aligns with what you are doing. Talk to practices that have already done a deal with them. Talk to doc, with nobody around, over a glass of wine, say, would you do this again? And have you compromised? And what, all that kind of stuff. So related to that, what are common mistakes? And I assume one mistake, and we can sort of set that aside, is not doing that kind of thing. But what are some other things that, practice owners, physicians should know about or think about or avoid, when pursuing something like this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if I could, let me just go back to your previous question and echo and build upon something which you just said, which is, in my experience, what most of the physicians that I work with, they aren't so much, it's not about, private equity is bad, right? And that's their fear. They're concerned about losing control, and they're concerned about a misalignment of interest. So for me, what I stress that, capital is a commodity. And what really matters is the cultural fit, the alignment of values, and the additional relationships and resources that a financial partner can bring. And so I stress that to my clients that you have to be the one, you're choosing them. It's not them choosing you. And in order to do that wisely, you have to do your due diligence. You have to spend time with them, socializing, breaking bread, having heart-to-heart conversations, getting time to know them. But, to your point, also talking to other groups that have partnered with them in the past and find out what was their experience like, what was good, what was bad, what'd you like, what didn't you like, as well as, other friends, colleagues that have gone down the path with a private equity partnership.
Yeah. That reverse due diligence, quote unquote, so let me ask you, and I'm going to guess your answer, but does that mean that, and I'm not going to use the word always, because if I say always, you're going to say no, because nothing's always, but does that mean generally you like to try to get clients to have a couple of options? Meaning it's a lot easier to say, to have that attitude of you choose them when you've got more than one, at least about offer or letter of intent or whatever that process is. But at least you start with talking to a couple, because if you're only locked in one and you go down a road for a bit, it's more like a yes or no, not a choice. So
Right.
is that part of something that you really would say is a success factor, that if you're going to go down this road, that you be talking to a number of different options?
Yeah, absolutely, David. And so, and that's also where, an investment banker, especially
That's
one
what
who's
you guys do.
smart and knows healthcare, and knows the investor universe, can be so important, because the biggest place we add value, right, is in making sure there's competition, right, and bringing, keeping the leverage in the physician's hands. And so we do a lot of our own kind of screening and qualifying up front before the physicians ever meet them. But yeah, we would always prefer to have, anywhere between, 5 and 10, maybe more highly interested groups, because, you never know which you're going to have disparate views among your partners, right? I like this group, I didn't like this person, and this puts us in the best position.
It makes total sense to me. Yeah, that's a significant number.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say, David, is because I've seen a lot of clients who've gone down this path. Unfortunately, there, a lot of your listeners, right, get inbound phone calls all the time, right? I would love to invest in your practice, love to buy your practice, right? It's oftentimes easy because the managers or managing partners are like, this is great, everybody's coming to us, we don't need somebody to help us, right?
Right.
And so they'll go down that path, and spend an inordinate amount of time responding to diligence requests with questions, all the while taking time away from running their practice, right? So the practice suffers, and then it turns out that the fit is terrible, or their valuation expectations are wildly off.
Yeah, I mean, this is a once in a lifetime transaction. Take it seriously. Don't don't just
Absolutely,
go whoever
absolutely,
happens to call the phone. I mean that
right.
just, what would you do anything else that way? Like would you start your career? Hey, we think you would be good at this in college. Oh yeah, really? I think I'll go do that for the rest of my
Right.
life. So,
Right.
all right. Well, we only got a couple minutes left, and I want to hit these last three questions I wrote down. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to hear about exit minded, et cetera. So, one is, and this may be the most important question for many people listening and watching this of our whole conversation, which is, especially coming from you and your experience, which is for practices that want to remain independent and not do this,
Yeah.
right? What can or should they be doing? And I'll just say one thing that relates to this. I had a surgeon client of mine who said, my best referrals, the people who like me the best, are the ones I don't do surgery on. Meaning that you're going to help people if they want to do this, but
Right.
if they don't, you know what it takes to be a detractive practice. And if you want to keep doing that till the last day, and hand it on to your younger partners, what have you, whatever that transition is, you can do that. So what are things that practices that want to remain independent should be doing?
Yeah. No, and it's a great question. And I've spent a lot of time, thinking about this. So I would say, and this is in no particular rank order, but, um, you know, professionalize a lot of practices are self-managed, right? The doctors will, hey, we'll rotate. Maybe we'll have a rotating president, or we'll have an executive committee of a handful of docs. In my experience, that's always a mistake, right? That you want to professionalize your management, as early as you can, right? You need to be able to practice at the top of your license, right? And create the most value you can with your time. And so kind of bringing in non-physician professionals is a really critical piece that unfortunately I think a lot of groups are slow to adopt.
Yeah.
One of the things that I see a lot, David, is also surprisingly, a lot of physicians don't necessarily understand the difference between fair market compensation for their services, for their physician services, and a return on their equity, right? So they're saying, this is great. I'm cashing, I'm taking out $1 million a year. This is great. But oftentimes what they don't realize is that may be, half of that may be the true fair market value for their services. The other half may be return on their investment that is not getting reinvested in the company, in the practice. And it's surprising to me how often I see that misunderstanding or misappreciation that they're taking their decision to take that cash is a decision not to invest in resources that the practice will need to grow.
Right. And we dealt with that at OJM Group for years, right? Which is how much income to take as the founding partners, Jason and I, versus pour back into the business, to have a CFO, to have a manager, to have more staff, to have better technology, et cetera. And it was a conscious decision. And, there were times where, there were years and years and years where we could have paid ourselves more and we didn't. But that was building value in the business that eventually, benefited us. So I want to come down to our last question, actually, because we're right at time here, which is I want to hear about Exit Minded. This is something that you're part of. It's a new venture. Tell us what it is and how it complements what you're doing at City Capital.
Yeah. So over the years, I worked on it with a lot of businesses and business owners who wanted to sell, wanted to raise capital or get liquidity, and they thought they were ready, and it turned out, I signed a investment banking engagement with them, thinking that assuming they were going to be ready, we only get to do sort of our look under the hood and do our real due diligence until after that engagement is signed. And then we realized that, there are a whole bunch of, you're not at all ready, and you're going to need, 12 to 48 months to fix all the things that we need to fix, whether those are people, management, information systems, employment issues, everything. We really look at everything. And as an investment banker working with middle market businesses, and as you appreciate, David, as a recovering lawyer, like I have literally seen every possible cause that will blow up a transaction. And so the reality is that most investment bankers, that's not the work they do, right? They're highly incentivized.
They're incentivized to get a deal done. I mean,
they're incentivized to get a deal done. So they only want, if you're not, if it looks like you're not sale ready, they're not going to talk to you, right? And unless you're in a sector that's attractive, unless they can really, feel like this transaction has a high probability of getting done in the next, 3 to 9 months, right? They're not going to spend any time with those business owners. And
so exit-minded. So let me just jump in here because for just time. So exit-minded sounds like it is your solution for that. It is, hey, it's a great title or name, exit-minded. This is something 18 months to 5 years out. We're thinking this might be where we need to go, and we need help to. First, we need someone to take a look at maybe, where we do need help, right? Get under the hood and say, hey, we need some help here and help there. And then get us to the point where there are no more warts, there's no more hidden cobwebs, et cetera, we are good to go. Sounds like, if that's right, and you and I've talked a little bit enough, so I know that it is, this would be very, I think, you guys are going to do well with this. And I'm curious to talk more about this in another conversation, because identifying like what kind of practices, are good candidates for that. And like, I mean, to me, you could use the analogy of getting the home ready before you sell it. It could be the minor leagues before the major leagues, getting, working on your second and third pitch as a pitcher, whatever the analogy is, but it's getting yourself ready for prime time. So when you're there, no hiccups, no surprises, et cetera, right? You're ready to go.
Right. Absolutely. And that's what excites me about it, David, is that, exit-minded basically operates upstream, of any transaction. Right. And it's what really, what we provide is kind of a buyer's lens risk-based assessment that surfaces structural, operational, regulatory, people issues, that will erode value or limit their options, right? With the goal of, hey, we want to identify them, prioritize them, give you recommendations for how to address them, that preserves value and optionality, right, for physicians. And what I love about it is that it's it's very complementary with, we don't, folks, exit-minded clients can work with whoever investment bank or bankers they want to work with. There's no obligation to work with me.
Separate service, et cetera.
It's a separate service, but what I love is that, and it's not just, unusual legal, tax, accounting issues. It's a lot of best practices that we see, and a lot of that is, as I'm sure you hear from your listeners, it's improving your revenue cycle management, right? It's leveraging APPs, right? It's diversifying away from insurance, which a lot of practices, don't realize they can do direct contracting. So to me, that's really the exciting part of it, David.
Listen, it makes total sense. I haven't heard other people doing it. So, kudos to you guys. And 3 is that, listen, if a practice goes through all this, they're going to be a better practice whether they end up doing a transaction or not. I'm sure their profitability is going to be higher. Their headache factor is going to be lower. Their sleep at night, hey, did we miss something compliance-wise? It's going to go away. So it's almost like why not do this? It's not committing yourself to a transaction, but it's committing yourself to run your practice better. And it makes a lot of sense.
That's the beauty, is that it's a great option for groups that want to remain independent.
Right. It just gets back to what we were talking about before.
Yeah.
So, Matt, thank you so much for being on. There's obviously more to talk about, and we'll probably have another episode coming up just about Exit Mind, and you'll tell some stories about successes there. But thank you so much for being on. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me, David. It's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to revisiting this and following up on it.
Awesome. And for everybody watching and listening, thank you again for being on. Every 2 weeks, we'll have another episode. If you're so inclined, please give us, a 5-star rating on the systems, on the platforms. Leave a nice comment, and you'll hear from me in another 2 weeks. Thank you.
The Wealth Planning for the Modern Physician podcast is brought to you by OJM Group Earned, a multidisciplinary wealth management firm dedicated to helping physicians build and preserve their wealth while reducing taxes. Episodes from previous seasons are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and other popular platforms. Podcast listeners can get a free copy of our book, Wealth Strategies for Today's Physician. Simply text WPPOD to 844-418-1212 to request your free copy. Be sure to join David every 2 weeks for the newest episode of the Wealth Planning for the Modern Physician podcast. This podcast is being provided for informational purposes only. The ideas and opinions expressed on this show by Mr. Mandell and his guests do not constitute legal, tax, or investment advice, or a recommendation of any particular security or strategy, and do not represent the opinions of the underwriters of this programming. Any information prepared from third-party sources is believed to be reliable, though its accuracy is not guaranteed. Opinions expressed in this commentary reflect subjective judgments of the speakers, based on conditions at the time of recording, and are subject to change without notice. Listeners should seek the input of their own financial, tax, and legal professionals before acting on any of the information provided.